around the world on 3news.com and across the social media platforms. You can find us at TV3 Ghana. Let's set up for the details now. And Finance Minister Ofori-Atta might have debunked claims that government has not been transparent about its COVID-19 expenditure. But the minority seems to be raising concerns about the quantum of funds used, that is 12 billion cedis, in meeting expenditures for the period. All these have triggered key analysts like former Minister for Finance Sekpe quoted as saying, considering the ripple effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, as well as the ever-present possibility of other natural and man-made hiccups going forward, there is a need to formally institute a strategic economic pathway to minimize the impact of such a development on the local economy. Well, joining me in studio is Dennis Wedam of our Research and News Planning Department to help us understand all this. Dennis, many thanks for your time. Now, what key observations have you made so far, particularly in response to the Finance Minister's, talks about in Parliament, which has brought some, public debate?
Well, so for a very long time, especially the minority, they've been looking forward to have the government account for all the COVID-19 funds that accrue during that time. So finally, the minister was in Parliament yesterday to give account of all that. So he started off by indicating, which lines or where did the revenue come from, or how they raised the money to fight COVID. And that particular figure, as we were told, stood at 19.3 billion. Now, of that figure, he told us that something around 12 billion has been spent on fighting COVID. Before he did that, he had to clarify, because there had been information out there that there have been contradictory figures from the Finance Ministry, from the Vice President, and then the President himself. You recall when the President came to Parliament, on the State of the Nation address, he did indicate that they spent some 17.7 billion in fighting COVID. The Information Minister had mentioned they spent 19 billion, so there were a lot of numbers thrown about. But the Finance Minister yesterday said that they have reconciled those figures, and that's about it. Now, when you want to look at the main line of expenditure, where they spent the money on, the first one had to do with what they did by way of support to households. And that's, in that regard, they were looking at the free water and electricity that was given, even though that's been contentious. They say it's not free. In 2020, they spent 1.55 million. In 2021, they spent 1.43 million. And in total, they spent 1.7 million for that particular item. When you look at for equipment and supplies too, it brings us to a total of 2.1 million. You look at health infrastructure, and this includes the Agenda 111, we spent so far 1.3 million Ghana cedis. It has to do with security operations as well, and then it goes on and on. So when you put all these figures together, you are getting something around 12 million Ghana cedis that has been spent on that particular item. When you come to a specific item of what was given to the households, there was a part where they talked about giving hot meals to people. Now, when you do the calculation of the number of people who were given food per, the unit cost, which they say was somewhere around 4.32 cedis, there's a difference between, there's a difference in the calculation. What it means is that that particular component, per the minister's explanation, was supposed to be for transportation. But the minority side of the House says that those figures need to be accounted for appropriately so that they know how much exactly went into the food itself, how much went into transport, because they lump all the figures together. Okay. There was also the concern about why the COVID-19 fund has not been indicated as a line of revenue, because the contention was that even though the public and private entities contribute to that fund, it has to be accounted before Parliament. So that issue also came up strongly. The COVID-19 fund has been managed by a separate entity altogether, but they thought that it would have been part of the whole thing that would come. So those are some of the things that have been coming up strongly, and also concerns about how much has been spent in water and then electricity, somewhere around, show you that figure. It's quite huge. So it's the reason that the minority says that these numbers need to be interrogated a bit more, so that clarity will be brought as to how the money was spent. So essentially, those are the things that the House looked at yesterday, and they put together a joint committee from the health side and then the finance side to interrogate the figures.
All right. Thank you very much, Dennis, with of our research and news planning department, breaking down for us the utilization of the 2020 and the COVID-19 funds there. But we're working the phone lines now to speak with Dr. Abu Sarkodie. He's an economist with the UGBS, and he's going to break it down for us much further. But in the meantime, the minority and majority are split over the accounts made by Finance Minister on the floor of Parliament, as the minority has called for a bipartisan probe into what they describe as discrepancies in the accounts, as the majority says government should rather be commended for the judicious use of the funds.
We cannot sit here and say that the Minister of Finance should be the only one accounting for the COVID amount. The Speaker, the Minister responsible for Finance is only a conduit of releasing the money. But the monies were spent at the various MDAs. The monies were spent at various MDAs. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I call on you, Mr. Speaker, to set up an ad hoc committee so that we can bring the various head of the MDAs, in particular, that spent the money, to account for this in detail. Mr. Speaker, I'm calling on you, Mr. Speaker, to use the powers under the Constitution, Article 101, to set up 103 of the Constitution, to set up an ad hoc committee to particularly get the various COVID entities that spent the money to account for it in detail.
20, when the COVID-19 outbreak occurred, we all were very scared and did not have any clue about this pandemic. It took a responsible government to devise a very deliberate plan to protect us, Mr. Speaker. All the 275 members in this chamber are alive. We all benefited one way or the other from the reliefs that have been presented to this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the extent that our spouses were even privileged to come to the hospital or the clinic to get their jabs.
The minister concluded that all the money that was utilized and not sitting in any bank account ended up at about 16.4 billion. He reported in that same document that when he now adds our own money, which in this case is the money he drew down on our contingency vote or contingency fund, the total amount is 18.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, this doesn't look like 12 billion. In fact, that is 50% underreported. From the minister's own document before this House, he is unable to speak to the same numbers a year after. That is very serious. Mr. Speaker, if I take the numbers the minister is reporting for 2021, that he spent 3.9 and add it to the figure he gave me for 2020, Mr. Speaker, I get total expenditure on COVID of 22.1 billion, the minister's own report. Mr. Speaker, the minister is not reporting to us 10 billion Ghana cedis of our own money.
Why?
In his own report. This is not my report.
The minister stated the facts. The minister did not veer away from the facts. The minister has been consistent, has been transparent, and today, nobody can say that during the lockdown, we didn't serve hot meals. Nobody can say that during the lockdown, Ghanaians did not receive nose masks. Nobody can say that Parliament of Ghana was denied what it needed to protect the 275 of us.
Well, just gone by is minority and the majority parts of Parliament disagreeing on the total expenditure of the COVID-19 funds there. But Dr. Abu Sarkodie is an economist with the Economics Department of the University of Ghana. Many thanks for your time, sir. I'm sure you've seen the COVID-19 budget expenditure. First of all, your reactions towards that.
First of all, I must commend the minority in Parliament for asking the minister to come and account for the funds. And also, I must also congratulate the minister for appearing before the House to give us the figures. In any case, most of the figures were already given in the budget. So those of us who are researchers, we already previewed to some of the figures that were thrown out. In my own calculation, the fiscal impact of COVID-19 was estimated around 26 billion in the year 2020. And so it was necessary for the minister to have accounted for that, and he did. And I'm sure the minority side also wants proper accountability, wants the detailed analysis of that. But you know, the minister did not have much time to go into details, like, for example, how much clinker was bought per person, how much was fiction, or all that. He just, as the minority would say, he gave the headline figures, and it is up to us to do the detailed analysis. So, yes, the headline figures have helped a lot. And as the minority is asking, I think probably it will help some of us who are doing research when we give the detailed analysis. It doesn't have to be read on the floor of Parliament. It could be put on their website for all of us to go and pick the figures for analysis. So I think, in a nutshell, it's just good for our democracy. And I thank the minority for doing the bit on behalf of Ghanaians, and also the finance minister for coming to answer the questions.
Okay, Doc, but on the COVID expenditure, what do you think we did wrong?
Well, I'm not sure he did anything wrong. I think it's a question of somebody asked a question on the floor of Parliament, and he needed answers. And so the person didn't seem to have been satisfied with the answers given. So from where I said, I don't see anything wrong with what the finance minister did. It was just to account for the monies which he took from the consolidated fund and also from the contingency fund. And one thing that many people did not get the understanding is that the fiscal impact of COVID-19 is not limited to the expenditure side. I think that's where the controversy is coming from. When we say the fiscal impact or the financial impact of COVID-19, it should not, the analysis should not be limited to the expenditure side. We must also take a look at the revenue shortfall. So for example, the borders were closed. There was little international trade or no international trade. There was lockdown. Government did not get the tax revenue from all these economic activities. And so there was a revenue shortfall. And everybody knows that there's a revenue shortfall. This is not limited to Ghana. The whole world, most countries recorded a revenue shortfall. And so what the minister has thought to do was that, yes, he took the so and so amount. He used some on the expenditure side, and he used the other side, part of it, to show up the fall in revenue. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
And so, well, maybe the people just wanted further explanation on, if you say there was a revenue shortfall and you use it for budgetary support, what and what specifically did you use the money for in terms of the budgetary support? I think that's what people are asking. But in terms of the broader picture, I don't see anything wrong with what the finance minister did.
Okay, finally, before I let you go, how can we minimize the impacts of COVID-19, the Russia-Ukraine war, on the local economy?
How do we minimize the impact on the local economy?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we cannot afford another lockdown. Ghana cannot afford another lockdown. The poverty levels will rise, there will be hunger. We cannot afford that. And so let's adhere to the COVID protocol. Like right now, we have the wearing of nose mask, we have the washing of, using hand sanitizer and washing of hands. And so let's use that we can always wake up and go to our offices and go to the marketplace to undertake our businesses. And on the government side, I think when we the individuals will obey the protocols, I think the government will have little to do in terms of trying to provide isolation centers and all that. So let's all make sure that in our own small way, from TV3 to University of Ghana to marketplaces, let's make sure that we wear the mask. And because it is the virus that causes the economic havoc. So if we're able to contain the virus, then there will be no economic impact again.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Edu Sarkodie, an economist with the University of Ghana Business School there.